So I just thought that was normal. And it wasn't until I did more sessions with the physio, understanding that isn't normal, that it should not be classed as normal, and that there are things that can be done about it. Today, we're going to be talking about something I never really paid attention to before having kids. And after them, well, I never knew that my play and running around with my kids would be inhibited by needing to make sure I went to the loo first, let alone having to be careful when I sneezed, cough, or even laugh. And I'm sure there are a good few of you nodding along already, as you know that I'm talking about needing to strengthen your pelvic floor after pregnancy and childbirth. So today I have Caren from Empowered Mums Fitness, who is a Mum Safe Level 3 certified trainer who specializes in working with mums of all ages and is passionate about pelvic floor and helping women with pelvic floor dysfunction exercise and move their bodies, which if this is the reason you're not able to fully engage with play with your children, then this is definitely the episode for you. She's also a mum of two herself, a personal trainer, and a woman after my own heart because she is a chocolate lover. She's won the Exercise New Zealand Group Trainer of the Year in 2023 and was also the winner of the Exercise New Zealand Community Awards in 2024. So I am very excited to welcome Caren on the podcast this week. So welcome,
Thank you.
Caren.
I am so excited to be here. I love talking about this. So I will try and keep it succinct.
Fantastic. So whether you're out on a walk, folding some washing, or multitasking around the house, let's dive on in and talk about everything pelvic floor. So we're going to start with the basics. Now, for me, I'd heard the word pelvic floor or the term pelvic floor had been thrown around a little bit before I'd had my children, but I hadn't paid any attention to it because I had no issues. It wasn't until after that I realized what it was all about. So can you give us a bit of a 101? What is pelvic floor?
Yeah, sure. So your pelvic floor muscles are the group of muscles within your pelvis, and they're often described like a hammock. So they sit like a hammock like this, supporting your bladder, your bowel, and your uterus. And they also have the function of responsible for bladder, bowel control, and sexual function. Would you like me to take you through a pelvic floor activation? And let's check in with our pelvic floor muscle.
That would be fantastic. I think this is a great time for everyone just to pause, find a place they can do this so we can actually activate our pelvic floor and spend some time doing it. Because I know for me, I know I need to do these exercises, but once you get busy with kids, you just keep going throughout the day. So let's take a pause and do some exercises.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So the first thing, there's so many cues for pelvic floor activations. I'm going to use my favorite one, but you've probably heard lots of other ones out there as well. But really what we want to be focusing on is making sure that we're squeezing and contracting them in the right way. So we're not pushing out instead of lifting up. And we also want to make sure that we're not engaging like our core muscles or our butt muscles or anything else when we're trying to do our pelvic floor activations as well. So we're going to imagine that you're in an elevator and you're trying to hold in a fart. So that's more the back part of your pelvic floor. Then you're going to imagine that you're putting in a tampon and you're like squeezing and drawing the tampon up. That's more the middle part. And then imagine that you're, really needing to go to the toilet and you're holding on a wee. So that is the front. So I'd like to say a quick, easy thing to remember, fart, tampon, wee, and relax. So you're trying to hold in that fart, squeeze that tampon, holding that wee, and then relax. So the important thing is that we're squeezing and we're lifting up inside. So another cue, which is very good for this visual, is lifting up a blueberry. So you're going to squeeze, grab the blueberry, lift it up inside, and then as you relax, you drop the blueberry. So the common mistakes for mums is that instead of squeezing and lifting up, we're squeezing and pushing down, and that puts a lot of pressure down through our pelvic floor. And then making sure that it is just those muscles that help you holding that fart and that urine, and it's not all the other ones that we're bracing and putting a lot of pressure through. So I can take you through how to do a couple. I'll just talk you through it because it's really helpful to incorporate it with our breathing as well. So first of all, we're going to breathe in and relax. Relax, let go of those tummy muscles. Don't think about squeezing or anything. You're just going to simply relax. Nice deep breath in. And then as you breathe out, you're going to squeeze, butt, tampon, wee, and lifting up or picking up that blueberry. As you breathe in, we're relaxing the pelvic floor. As you breathe out, pick up that blueberry, holding that fart, lifting up, and breathing in and relaxing. Breathe out and squeeze and lift. Breathing in and relaxing. So that's 3 breaths, but I like to recommend for mums that connection breath. I call it the connection breath because you're connecting your diaphragm with your pelvic floor. And if you can do that every day, up to 10 times, and it's a really good way of getting that connection between your breath and your pelvic floor to manage intra-abdominal pressure. And it's one of those things that we often don't think about during pregnancy and postpartum and how everything changes. That connection can get a little bit lost.
Thank you so much. And it's so great having those 3 things to remember: the fat, the tampon, and the wee. Because for me, I know I probably focus on one more than the other. So having all those 3 in that process really is really fantastic. So that's something we can all challenge ourselves to do this week and ongoing, is actually keeping on doing these pelvic floor exercises. Because what happens to our pelvic floor during pregnancy and childbirth?
Yeah, so during pregnancy, your pelvic floor stretches. So from the additional weight of baby, the placenta, extra fluid sitting on top. So even if you have a C-section, your pelvic floor has been impacted throughout the pregnancy. So if you have a vaginal birth, then your pelvic floor can stretch up to 3 times its length to allow for baby to come out. So it goes through a lot during pregnancy and birth. And obviously when we have baby, it doesn't automatically just tighten back up and go back to what it was pre-pregnancy. It slowly or gradually changed throughout your pregnancy. So we need to understand what it's doing now and give it the right exercises or the right time to be able to recover, and check in with that, like with our pelvic floor exercise we just did.
Fantastic. And I think this already is an episode that you should probably share with your partners as well, is that us as women, it's something that's in our bodies, but it's something that's not seen. And I know it can be really hard for those unseen things to be understood by others. So I would say, once you've had a listen to all of this, share it with your partner as well. Get them to listen to it, because then A, they can remind you about it, but B, they can have more compassion and understanding when you are re-strengthening these muscles and you're like, oh, I need to go to the toilet, or I've just wet my pants. So yeah, have a go at sharing it with them too and see what they think, see what they already know about the pelvic floor. Okay, before we go into 5 things that you wish everyone would know, any more points around knowing about our pelvic floor?
I think just the relaxation part as well. It's often not really talked about. When you hear the word Kegels as your pelvic floor exercises, we think of that strengthening and that squeezing, but it's really important for that muscle to be able to relax fully as well. So go through its full range of motion, not just go squeeze, squeeze, squeeze all the time. So leaking or incontinence can be a signal of a weak pelvic floor, but if your pelvic floor is too tight as well, you can also have similar symptoms. So we want our pelvic floor to be able to relax as well as contract all the way through.
That's all really interesting. There is so much to learn. It's more than just another muscle to work. Like if you're trying to build your biceps or trying to get stronger for something, it's something that has so many complexities to it. And as I said at the start, you don't really talk about it until after you've had kids. So it's so important to be able to share with your friends and talk about and just make it a normal part of a muscle that's growing. Okay, so if there was 5 things that you wanted parents to know, mums to know about their pelvic floor, what would be your first one?
Yeah, the first one is definitely leaking. It's common. 1 in 3 mums will experience leaking. And when I say leaking, it doesn't just mean urine. It could be flatulence. It could be fecal as well. Not as common, but it does happen, and it is a thing. So it's a common experience for a lot of mums to be leaking postpartum, but it doesn't have to be your new normal. That's definitely what I thought when I had my first, is that, oh, I leak. That's just a normal thing now because I've had babies. It makes sense. The baby's gone through there. Things aren't right, but there's definitely help out there, and you can get help with it. A little bit of rehab and training on that pelvic floor, and it can be really, really helpful, not only for now, like postpartum, but if you go through future pregnancies and into menopause as well.
So then how does it lead into your point number 2?
So point number 2 is women's health or pelvic health physios. So I did not know these people existed to start with, but I do now. And they specialize in the pelvic floor and, women's issues. So really important to be able to see a women's health physio, ideally during pregnancy. If you could see a women's health physio around that 20-week mark during pregnancy, then you have a really good understanding of what your pelvic floor is doing, so you can do the right things to help you with that birth and postpartum experience as well. So that's number 1. Then also seeing them postpartum, even if you haven't been able to see them during pregnancy. In an ideal world, every woman would be able to see a women's health physio or pelvic health physio postpartum. Everybody is so unique and different. So getting a really detailed insight as to what our pelvic floor and our deeper core is actually doing can be really helpful for our return to exercise or even just mum life, which is also just like another big workout, isn't it?
I think that's also true. And that's one thing that I really realized with my first and my second pregnancy is after my first pregnancy, I'd heard all about pelvic floor physio. And so I was like, right, okay, I'm going to book myself in. So I had to pay for it. And I needed one session. And I learned a lot from them. And if you haven't been to a women's health pelvic floor physio, do know that they do an internal examination, which I wasn't quite prepared for, but it's completely professional, completely fine. But I learned a lot from that. But I only went to that one session and kind of got some good things, but didn't really fully understand the importance of continuing with these exercises, continuing to think about it. And then it wasn't until my second that I then had a Caren pregnancy and was able to have some free through ACC physio. And so I got 5 sessions, I think. And I was talking to the physio about how between the first and second, I tried to get back to running, but, just leaking. And that's just what happens because I've had other friends who are mums and they said, it's just what happens. You just have to, put a good pad on or put your special undies on so you don't leak all the way through. So I just thought that was normal. And it wasn't until I did these more sessions with the physio, understanding that isn't normal, that it should not be classed as normal, and that there are things that can be done about it. And so she gave me an initial program just to do that initial strengthening for mum life, and then a bit of an extended program to strengthen for running. And I was able to run without peeing. And I was like, this is revolutionary. So I definitely highlight the need to, if you've got any birth injury in New Zealand, there's now a lot of physio that's being covered. Or if you have the ability to pay for a physio, doing at least one session, but asking for a plan and following through that plan, or going to different classes, which we'll talk about later, where people have the understanding and the knowledge around pelvic floor. So you can have that continual support, because while it's very common, as Caren was saying, it's 1 in 3 women have different issues, it doesn't need to be you, and there are things you can do about it, which is so important. Okay, so is there anything more about point number 2?
Yeah, so the recommendation is everyone would be able to see a women's health physio, but how do you see one? So there's private clinics, so you can self-refer, you can book in online or give them a call. So it is an investment, and I say an investment because the initial consultation can be over $200, and that is a lot. I understand that. They, like you said, sometimes you only need to go once to get it. If it's just more of a checkup and going, oh, these are my plans, this is where I want to go, I want to get back to running, then they can give you a really good idea of where you're at now. And so you're not having to go like weekly or monthly like you do if you've got like, a shoulder injury or a knee injury. So that's privately, and often going privately, you will be seen a little bit quicker, but you can have your doctor or your midwife refer you to the women's health physios in the public system. So I know down in Dunedin, it can be a little bit of a wait, especially if it's more of a checkup and you don't have a real pressing issue. But highly recommend if you can get in there and get seen, especially if you are experiencing some symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction, then there's definitely ways of seeing a women's health physio, whether it's publicly or privately.
And that is so good to know, because again, it's just one of those things that aren't really talked about. So if you do experience any dysfunction, do make sure you have a Google, talk to your midwife, talk to your doctor, and find some steps ahead, because you're not alone. There's a lot of us that have experienced it, but there is a way forward. Okay, so point number 3, what would you like to share?
Yeah, so point number 3 is education. Education is power, right? We don't know what we don't know. And for mums that experience leaking, or whether it's pelvic pain or a heaviness or just not feeling very comfortable down there, it's hard to know what to do and where to go. And that it is an issue that you can get help with, like we talked about earlier. So just learning more about the pelvic floor, and I have so much to share. There's so many little things and tips and tricks that I could share in terms of getting the most out of your pelvic floor exercises and all that stuff. But I know we don't have time for all of that today. So definitely learning more about the pelvic floor, and then understanding what your pelvic floor is doing and what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So if you have more knowledge, then when you're seeking that help from your GP or your midwife or your women's health physio, then you're able to advocate better for yourself, and it's going to set you up for any future pregnancies. And if you start experiencing things, you may be fine postpartum after your first birth, but then the next pregnancy happens or later on down through perimenopause and menopause, that's when you start to experience some symptoms. So just having an awareness of your pelvic floor is part of your body. I know we haven't talked about it a lot in the past, but opening up that conversation and seeking help. And there's a lot more people out there that are able to help now.
So just following on from that, if you've had your baby and your baby is 1 or 5 or 15, or your baby is now 30, is it too late to start looking at strengthening your pelvic floor or working on the dysfunction?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the statistics are that it's more prevalent as you age, because as you go through perimenopause and menopause, you've got all those hormonal changes happening again. And so, yeah, you're more likely to experience some of those issues.
That's good to know. So no matter where you are in your journey, if you've had pregnancy and childbirth, whether you are 20 or 67,
yes,
if you're feeling any discomfort or if you've got any issues with that, do contact someone and do reach out and do know you're not alone.
that's it.
Okay, so the next point number 4, what would you like to share?
Yeah, so pelvic floor dysfunction or leaking isn't just the only thing that women can experience down with their pelvic floor. So it's not just weeing yourself. Like I mentioned before, it could be like flatulence, not able to hold in a fart, or fecal incontinence. But then also the urgency. So there's a type of incontinence that's related to when you need to go like right away type thing. Like you don't think you're going to be able to make it to the toilet, needing to go all the time, like really frequently. And sometimes things in terms of the bladder control and that frequency and urgency, that might be more of a bladder retraining type thing as opposed to the strength of your pelvic floor. So there's a lot going on, with all those systems down there. So it's not just strengthen your pelvic floor muscles and you'll be fine. Also, like pelvic pain during sex, a heaviness or dragging or bulging feeling in the vagina can be an indication of pelvic organ prolapse. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown on prolapse. Pelvic organ prolapse is where your bladder, your bowel, or your uterus will descend down into the vaginal cavity. So there's varying degrees of that. Some of those organs can descend right down and outside of the vagina in severe cases. So it is something to be aware of, is that if you've got those weaker pelvic floor muscles and even the supporting tissues around those pelvic floors, if you've got lots of pressure going down all the time, so for example, if you went back to running and you've got that high impact going down through your pelvic floor, then that's when prolapse can happen. So a prolapse is not something that is easily fixed. You can get surgery for it, but and you can do conservative treatment to manage symptoms. But if you can prevent a prolapse, then let's go with that. So back to the education thing, what do I need to do to make sure I've got a strong pelvic floor, but the exercise or the activities that I'm doing when I'm playing with my kids are going to be okay for my pelvic floor as well.
Those are such great things to keep in mind. And I think there's a really good point saying that we're talking all about pelvic floor, but there can also be other things around, so like bladder control and contraction. So whenever you're talking about this, if you're thinking about it and you're thinking, oh, some of these things hit home with me, these points really resonate, talk to your doctor or your midwife or your pelvic floor physio, and they'll be able to refer you and be able to support you in the way that you need, which is really good. Okay, so what is your last point you'd love to share?
So my last point is Kegels are not the only answer. So we often will link, right, pelvic floor, I've had a baby, I've got a weak pelvic floor, I just need to strengthen. Do my Kegel exercises, squeeze, and I'll be fine. But like I mentioned before, everybody is different. Everyone's experience is different. So that may not be the best for you, or it may just be one small part of a whole treatment plan for you. So pelvic floor, you can have a hypertonic pelvic floor, which is that if you're strengthening all the time, if you've got a history of like horse riding or like elite high level athletes, then you're maybe more likely to have a pelvic floor that doesn't know how to relax very well. So if you've got a hypertonic pelvic floor, it's kind of always switched on. If you're trying to do Kegels and squeeze, you're going to make it worse, because what you really need to do is be able to do that strength in the whole contraction, not just at the top part. So that help hypertonic pelvic floor. And then your pelvic floor muscles don't work alone. So they're all connected with so I've talked about the pelvic floor muscles that hold up your bladder, bowel, and uterus, but then your hip muscles and glute muscles all connect into the pelvis as well. And then you've also got your deeper core system, which your pelvic floor is a part of. So I mentioned before the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the top of your core system. Pelvic floor is the bottom. And then you've got the transverse abdominis, which is underneath the obliques and the six pack. It's way down in there, but that also works with our breathing and our pelvic floor to manage intra-abdominal pressure and support us through any type of movement. So we want to make sure that we don't just have a strong pelvic floor, but it's working well with our diaphragm, with our transverse abdominis, and those other supporting muscles are all working as they should. So you're not just putting extra pressure down through your pelvic floor because it is at the bottom. So likely, if the other things aren't working quite right, then the extra pressure is going to be down through your pelvic floor. So we have to look at it as a whole body system type thing and look in terms of your posture and alignment, your breathing, and the strength of those other supporting muscles and how they're actually working and turning on when they should be turning on. Our bodies are amazing in that we can still move and can still do things that we want to do. But if we're doing it without those deeper muscles and those pelvic floor and TA muscles not contracting or coming on when they should first thing, then the other muscles take over. And then we, lead to injury and aches and pains and things like that.
This is so fantastic because I think, as you said, education is power, and knowing what you're asking for, knowing what you're feeling, knowing all that really supports and being able to have a strong enough pelvic floor for doing what you need to do with life so that you don't have the issues where you can't play with your kids because you're leaking, or you can't go for a run, or you can't cough or sneeze, or suddenly halfway through your work day, you're like, I need to change my undies. So all of this, thank you so much for sharing, because I feel like I've definitely learned a lot more about my pelvic floor from this. I know other people will too. So if there are one or two take-home points you'd really love people to understand, what would they be?
Yeah, so I think the first take-home point is just connecting that pelvic floor with your breathing, and then that you can incorporate that into the activities that you do, whether it's you play with your children, lifting the groceries, or carrying the capsule or the pram out of the car and things. And so we call it blow before you go. If you purse your lips, you're more likely to activate your pelvic floor. So before you go to lift up baby or stand up from the floor, say you've been playing on the floor and you're going to stand up, you want to blow out. So you're activating that pelvic floor muscle with your breath and ensuring that it's switching on during the hardest part of what you're doing. So whether it's the lifting or the standing up. So if I was to get up out of this chair, the blow before you go method would be, and I'm standing up. So you can blow out, connect with your pelvic floor, and then stand up. So there's not as much pressure going down through your pelvic floor. So that's, probably the first tip is that do practice that connection breath, get in tune with your pelvic floor and your breathing, and then use it when you're going to lift those heavier things and move in awkward ways. So just have that awareness around how you're moving and your pelvic floor. Another tip, I think, would be, I hear from mums all the time, I keep forgetting, I can't find the time, I'm busy, I'm doing this and that. So my advice is just anything is better than nothing. So yes, ideally we have, your physio would give you a protocol of how to strengthen your pelvic floor. I could give you some advice, but if you've got that all or nothing mentality, then you're likely not going to do anything for a long time. So what if you just did, when you remember, I'm just going to do like 3 squeezes or 10 squeezes. When you go to bed at night, before you go to sleep, activate, do some of your pelvic floor activations and relaxation. So it's just about fitting it in. And it's the same with any type of exercise postpartum, to be honest, as it doesn't have to be what you did pre-pregnancy. Fit it in with your life and trying to just add more movement and more connection with your pelvic floor until you feel that it's strong and supporting you, through those movements and play.
Fantastic. And then just one last question on that. You said kind of doing it in your everyday life or just before you go to bed. Is there any benefit, better, worse, about doing it lying down or sitting or standing up or moving?
Yeah. So starting off with lying down is easier because you've taken gravity out, right? But we don't spend most of our days lying down, especially when we've got little ones. We're not even lying down throughout the whole night. So it can be really helpful to start lying down on your back with your knees up, like you're about to do a sit up, but connecting in with your pelvic floor there, and then trying different positions. So sitting in a chair, doing it on all fours, and then in standing. So it's, you move throughout the day If you can't feel it in standing, then practice down on the ground to build up strength. But eventually you want to be able to contract and relax your pelvic floor in all different positions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for today, for the time on this podcast. I know there are a lot of take-home points. Hopefully a lot of people have got the idea again that they can just do these exercises anytime. There's not that stress. We can do them. We can think about it as we go. So if we want to learn more from you, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm under at Empowered Mums Fitness. Also, my website, empowermefitness.co.nz. I have lots of free resources on my website as well. So I know we haven't touched this point yet, but a quick one. Nutrition is really important for your pelvic floor as well. Nutrition and hydration. So yeah, there's a nutrition guide. I've got a pelvic floor guide and some other cool resources that mums can check out and get a really good understanding of their pelvic floor and get started at least as well. I'm a Mum Safe trainer. Another really good resource is the mumsafemovement.com website. So there's lots of articles on there covering all sorts of topics on pregnancy and postpartum and supporting women. And they also have a search function, so you can find a women's health physio that's local to you and a personal trainer that's local to you that will support you with your pelvic floor or returning to that exercise that you want to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And if anyone is wanting to find out more and you think, I can't remember all these things or I can't remember the exercises, don't worry. I'll have them all at playschemas.com/blog. That's play, schemas.com/blog. You can search for this episode and I'll have everything there so you can just click your way through so that you can find it all again. So again, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so wonderful. And everyone remember, today is a great day to play. And if your pelvic floor is inhibiting you, make sure you do something about it because you don't have to live like this.